The bloodied bandage slipped from Cassandra's trembling fingers as Cormac's calloused hands reached for the cloth binding her face. "Please," she whispered, pressing herself against the weathered barn wall of Millbrook Valley, "don't look." But the Cherokee warrior had already seen too much, the way she flinched when children stared, how she kept to shadows in this small frontier town, the desperate pain behind eyes that once danced with mischief. 3 months ago, when the Comanche raiders had swept through like a plague of locusts, they'd left more than burned crops and stolen cattle. They'd left her marked. "Show me," Cormac commanded softly, his war-painted fingers steady despite this storm brewing in his chest. He'd killed 7 men that night defending Millbrook, but he'd been too late to save her from the chief's blade. Cassandra shook her head violently, copper hair catching moonlight that filtered through the barn's broken slats. "You'll leave, just like the others." Just like, her voice cracked like autumn leaves, "I won't." The words fell between them heavy as river stones. She'd been the town's belle once, daughter of the preacher, promised to the banker's son, the kind of woman who made hardened cowboys remove their hats and stammer like schoolboys. Now she cleaned floors in the saloon's back rooms and jumped at sudden sounds. Cormac stepped closer, his buckskin shirt rustling. "I've seen worse things than scars, Blue Eyes." "Have you seen a woman-made monster?" The question tore from her, throat raw and bleeding. "Have you seen what happens when a man carves his hatred into flesh?" His jaw tightened. As a half-breed caught between two worlds, he'd known hatred intimately, felt it in the suspicious stares of white settlers, heard it in the whispered slurs when he walked Millbrook's dusty Main Street. But Cassandra's pain cut deeper than prejudice. It was carved in flesh and burned into soul. "Remove it," he said again, gentler now. "Or I will." She pressed the cloth tighter. "The engagement's off." Rutherford said he couldn't stomach looking at damaged goods. His exact words. Cormac's hand stilled. He thought of golden-haired Rutherford with his soft merchant hands and softer spine, thought of how the man had publicly rejected her 3 days after the attack. The memory sparked something dangerous in his chest. "Then he's a fool. Am I supposed to thank you for pity?" "This isn't pity." His thumb traced her jawline above the bandage. "This is something else entirely." Before she could protest, his fingers found the knot. The cloth fell away like shed skin, revealing the truth carved in parallel lines from temple to chin. 3 deliberate scars that twisted her once perfect features into something fierce and foreign. Cassandra held her breath, waiting for the inevitable disgust, the retreat, the stammered excuses. Instead, Cormac cupped her damaged face in both hands, his dark eyes drinking in every mark. "Beautiful," he whispered, and she felt her world shift like earthquake ground. "You're lying." "I don't lie to beautiful women." His lips curved in something too dangerous to call a smile, especially ones worth fighting for. The Winchester rifle barrel pressed cold against Cormac's temple as dawn painted Millbrook's Main Street the color of old blood. Behind the weapon stood Mortimer Rutherford, not the banker's pampered son, but the banker himself, flanked by 3 hired guns whose spurs jingled like death bells. "Step away from her, Breed," Rutherford snarled, his usually immaculate suit rumpled from a night of drinking and scheming. "Miss Cassandra belongs to civilized folk." Cormac didn't move from where he stood beside the general store, his hand resting casual-like on his knife hilt. Cassandra pressed against the storefront behind him, her scarred face pale in the growing light. Word traveled fast in small towns by midnight. Everyone knew the Cherokee half-blood had been seen talking to the preacher's ruined daughter. "Don't recall hearing any ownership papers," Cormac replied, voice steady as winter stone. The banker's face mottled purple. "You think because my boy won't have her, she's free for any savage to claim? Some things about civilization you'll never understand." One of the hired guns, a rail-thin man with dead eyes, shifted his grip on a Colt .45. Just say the word. Mr. Rutherford. One less engine won't upset nobody. Please, Cassandra whispered, stepping forward. The morning sun caught her scars, making them gleam like silver threads. I'll go home. I won't cause more trouble. But Cormac caught her wrist, his touch gentle despite the violence crackling around them. You're not the one causing trouble. Brave words for a man about to die, Rutherford sneered. You see, Breed, I've been thinking all night about your little declaration. Cassandra may be damaged, but she's still white, still Christian, still worth more than any heathen warrior. The rifle's safety clicked off. That so? Cormac's smile turned Wolf sharp. Then you won't mind explaining to Marshal Crawford why you're threatening a man who helped save this town? Rutherford's confidence wavered. 3 months ago, when Comanche war paint had gleamed in Millbrook's burning streets, Cormac had stood between the raiders and the bank, had bled for these ungrateful fools. Crawford ain't here, the dead-eyed gunman pointed out. No, came a gravelly voice from the saloon's batwing doors, but I am. Marshal Crawford emerged like judgment personified silver badge catching sunlight, weathered hand resting on his holstered peacemaker. Behind him walked Preacher Donovan, Cassandra's father, his Bible clutched tight enough to whiten his knuckles. Lower the weapon, Mort, Crawford commanded, before I decide you're disturbing my peace. This is about honor, Rutherford protested, about maintaining proper order. Honor? Preacher Donovan's voice carried the thunder of Sunday sermons. Where was honor when my daughter needed healing? When she needed acceptance? His eyes found Cormac's. This man showed her kindness when her own kind showed her cruelty. The hired guns exchanged uncertain glances. Killing a half-breed was one thing, defying the marshal and preacher together was quite another. Rutherford's rifle wavered. She's not his to protect. She's her own to protect, Cassandra said suddenly, stepping out from behind Cormac. The scars on her face seemed to burn in the morning light, transforming her from victim to something far more dangerous. And I choose? Him. The words hung between them like thrown gauntlets. Then you choose to be outcast, Rutherford spat. No decent folk will have anything to do with either of you. Cormac stepped forward, his presence filling the space between them like gathering storm clouds. Decent folk already proved what they're worth. The rifle lowered as Rutherford read something fatal in the warrior's eyes. Promise that some debts would be collected in blood and shadow. Inside the small wooden church, dust motes danced like spirits in colored sunlight streaming through stained glass windows. Preacher Donovan closed his Bible with the sound of closing coffins and looked across the altar at his daughter and the Cherokee warrior who'd claimed her heart. You understand what you're asking, he said to Cormac, his voice echoing in the empty sanctuary. Marriage means protection, means standing between her and a world that won't accept what it cannot understand. Cormac's dark eyes never wavered. I've been standing between hatred and what I love my whole life, preacher. This is nothing new. Cassandra sat in the front pew, her fingers tracing the scars that marked her as different. 3 days had passed since the confrontation with Rutherford, and the town's cold shoulder had grown even colder. Children pointed and whispered. Women crossed themselves when she passed. Even the saloon owner had let her go, claiming her presence disturbed the customers. Papa, she said softly, I know this isn't what you planned for me. Donovan moved to sit beside his daughter, his weathered hands gentle as he lifted her chin. Child, what I planned died the night those raiders came. What matters now is what rises from the ashes. Through the windows, they could see Millbrook's Main Street, where normal folk went about normal lives, unaware that in this sacred space, 3 people prepared to challenge everything their small world held dear. The town won't like it, Donovan continued, looking at Cormac. They'll call it unholy, unnatural. Some might even try to stop it. Let them try. The warrior's voice carried the quiet confidence of a man who'd faced down war parties and lived to tell about it. Cassandra stood, moving to where Cormac waited. Are you certain? Once we do this, there's no going back. No changing your mind. When people stare, when they whisper about the breed and his scarred wife. Instead of answering with words, Cormac took her damaged face in his hands, thumbs tracing the ridged flesh where the Comanche chief's knife had written its story. These marks don't make you less. They make you more. They make you a survivor. The cavalry officer from Fort Gibson asked me to perform his wedding next month, Donovan said quietly. $100 fee. I could use that money for the church roof. He paused, meeting his daughter's eyes. But some things matter more than money. Outside, hoofbeats thundered past probably Rutherford's men, still patrolling like wolves circling. Wounded prey. The banker hadn't given up his twisted courtship. He'd made that clear through messages delivered by nervous shop owners and veiled threats whispered in saloon shadows. When? Cassandra asked. Tonight, Cormac replied. Before they can organize anything official to stop us. Donovan nodded slowly. I'll need witnesses. Marshal Crawford, maybe Doc Henderson if he's sober enough to stand. What about your congregation? Cassandra worried. They'll blame you for this. Her father smiled, the expression transforming his stern features. Let them. I've been preaching about love conquering all for 30 years. Time I proved I believed my own sermons. As if summoned by their conversation, the church door opened with a groan of old hinges. Marshal Crawford stepped inside, hat in hand, his spurs ringing against wooden floors. Heard there might be a wedding tonight, he said simply. Thought you might need someone to stand up with the groom. Someone with a badge. Cormac extended his hand. Would be honored, Marshal. Crawford shook it firmly. Honor's mine, son. Any man who bleeds for this town earns my respect. Any woman brave enough to love despite the cost earns it twice over. The afternoon sun slanted lower, painting the church in shades of gold and amber. Soon, darkness would fall. Soon, vows would be spoken that would bind two outcasts together against whatever storms might come. One more thing, Donovan said as they prepared for the ceremony. After tonight, you'll both need to disappear for a while. Let tempers cool. I know a place my brother's ranch in Colorado Territory. Safe passage, fresh start. Cassandra looked at Cormac questioningly. Leaving Millbrook meant leaving everything familiar, heading into wilderness where survival depended on strength and trust. Together? He asked simply. Together, she confirmed. Outside, the first stars appeared like scattered diamonds against velvet sky, bearing witness to a love that refused to be conquered by scars, prejudice, or fear. The church bells didn't ring that night. Donovan feared the sound would draw unwanted attention. Instead, by candlelight and whispered vows, Cassandra became Mrs. Cormac Brightfeather in a ceremony witnessed only by Marshal Crawford, Doc Henderson, and the painted saints staring down from stained glass windows. Do you take this woman? Donovan intoned, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Scarred but not broken, marked but not diminished, to be your lawful wedded wife? I do, Cormac replied, his fingers intertwining with Cassandra's. On her wedding finger, he placed a simple silver band carved with Cherokee symbols for strength and eternal love. Outside, autumn wind rattled the church windows like impatient spirits. Somewhere in that darkness, Rutherford's men patrolled the streets, but inside this sacred space, nothing existed except two hearts choosing each other against all odds. By the power vested in me by God and the territory of Oklahoma, Donovan declared, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The kiss that sealed their union tasted of tears and hope, defiance and desperate love. When they broke apart, Cassandra's scars caught the candlelight like warrior paint. "Mrs. Brightfeather," she whispered, testing the name. "It sounds ... Right," Cormac finished. "It sounds right." Doc Henderson, surprisingly steady for a man who usually lived at the bottom of whiskey bottles, produced a marriage certificate from his coat. "Made it official-like," he mumbled. "Dated and signed proper. Anyone wants to dispute this union, they'll have to take it up with territorial law." Marshal Crawford shook Cormac's hand. "Better get moving, son. Rutherford's been drinking heavy all day, talking about cleaning up unnatural unions. Don't trust him to respect church sanctuary." They gathered quickly Cassandra's few belongings in a carpet bag, Cormac's weapons and survival gear, enough supplies for a hard journey to Colorado Territory. Preacher Donovan pressed money into his daughter's hands and a letter of introduction. To his brother. "Tell Jeremiah I sent my most precious treasure," he whispered, embracing Cassandra. "Tell him to guard her well." "I'll guard her myself," Cormac promised. They slipped out through the church's back door into star-drunk darkness. Cormac's horses waited in the graveyard, too. Strong mustangs that could carry them far from Millbrook's poisoned embrace. As Cassandra mounted her mare, a voice cut through the night like breaking glass. "Going somewhere, Mrs. Brightfeather?" Rutherford emerged from behind a monument, flanked by his 3 hired guns. Moonlight gleamed off their drawn weapons and cold smiles. "The ceremony's over," Cormac said calmly, though his hand found his knife. "Hilt, nothing left for you here." "On the contrary," Rutherford purred, "everything I want is right here. You see, I've been thinking about our conversation, about civilization and what it means. Realized I was wrong." He stepped closer, his pale eyes reflecting starlight like chips of ice. "I don't want her because she's white or Christian or civilized. I want her because she's broken, because she knows her place now, because damaged goods don't get to choose. They're buyers." The hired guns spread out, cutting off escape routes. In the distance, more hoofbeats approached. Rutherford had brought reinforcements. "Last chance breed," the banker continued. "Ride away alone, and I might let you live. Stay, and I'll make sure your Indian burial takes a real long time." Cassandra's mare shifted nervously, sensing the violence gathering like storm clouds. Her scarred face was marble pale, but her voice rang clear and strong. "I choose my husband," she declared. "In sickness and health, for better or worse. That includes dying beside him if necessary." Cormac smiled, an expression full of pride and deadly promise. "Then I reckon we're about to make some widows." The first shot shattered church windows. The second sent pigeons exploding from their roosts in screaming clouds. But by then, the Cherokee warrior and his scarred bride were already moving, racing toward destiny on horses that carried them toward either freedom or death together, as they'd sworn before God and witnesses to always be. Behind them, Millbrook erupted in gunfire and shouting voices. But ahead lay only darkness and stars and the promise of a new life built on love strong enough to survive anything. Blood from the bullet graze on. Cormac's shoulder painted his shirt black in the moonlight as their horses thundered through Devil's Canyon, 20 miles west of Millbrook. Behind them, the thunder of pursuing hoofbeats echoed off stone walls like drums of war. "How many?" Cassandra gasped, her mare's sides heaving as they navigated the treacherous trail. Cormac risked a glance back at the dust cloud rising against the stars. 8, maybe 10. Rutherford brought half the county. The canyon narrowed ahead, forcing them single file between towering rock faces that seemed to press closer with each stride. It was dangerous ground. One stumble would send horse and rider tumbling into the depths, but it was also an opportunity. There, Cormac pointed to a ledge 30 feet above the trail. Old Comanche hideout, if we can reach it. We'll be trapped, Cassandra finished, or they will be. His smile was sharp as winter starlight. Trust me? Without hesitation, she nodded. 3 hours married, and already she'd learned that Cormac Brightfeather never made promises he couldn't keep. They dismounted at the base of a natural chimney in the rock face, their horses blowing hard from the brutal pace. Cormac's Cherokee blood sang in his veins as he found handholds invisible to white man's eyes, leading his bride up stone that had sheltered his mother's people for generations. The ledge was smaller than he'd remembered, barely wide enough for 2 people to stand, but it commanded a perfect view of the canyon trail below. More importantly, it could only be reached by climbing, and climbing men made easy targets. Strip cartridges from my rifle belt, he whispered, checking his Winchesters. Action. When they come into range, I'll need to reload fast. Cassandra's fingers worked efficiently despite their trembling. Below, torchlight flickered between the canyon walls as their pursuers approached. She could hear Rutherford's voice carried on desert wind, promising gold to whoever brought back the breed and his whore alive. Cormac, she whispered, what if we don't make it? What if? He silenced her with a kiss that tasted of gunpowder and desperate love. Then we die as we lived together. The first riders entered the kill zone, 3 men on blown horses, rifles ready but eyes scanning the wrong places. City men, soft men, who'd never learned to read stone and shadow. Cormac's first shot dropped the lead rider from his saddle. The second sent horses screaming and rearing as their masters fought for control. In the chaos, 2 more men fell before. The survivors found cover. Brightfeather! Rutherford's voice boomed from the canyon mouth. I know you're up there, breed. Send down the woman, and I'll make your death quick. Instead of answering, Cormac sent another bullet ricocheting off the rocks near the banker's position. The message was clear enough. For an hour, the battle raged in fits and starts. Rutherford's men tried twice to scale the cliff face, but Cherokee marksmanship and gravity sent them tumbling back to broken bones and bloody curses. The banker himself stayed safely hidden, letting hired guns pay the price for his obsession. Running low, Cormac reported, counting his remaining cartridges. 12 shots left, maybe 13. Below, at least 5 men still moved. Cassandra pressed. Close, her warmth the only real thing in a world gone mad with violence. I love you, she said simply. Whatever happens, remember that. I'll remember, he promised, then added with fierce certainty, but we're not dying tonight. As if summoned by his words, new sounds echoed from the canyon's far and more hoofbeats, but different somehow, lighter, faster, and accompanied by war cries that raised the hair on Cassandra's neck. Cherokee, Cormac breathed, recognition flooding his features. A dozen painted warriors swept into the canyon like avenging spirits, their ponies sure-footed on stone, their weapons gleaming with starlight and deadly purpose. At their head rode a man Cassandra had never seen but somehow recognized, the same strong jaw as Cormac, the same dark eyes burning with inner fire. My brother, Cormac explained, wonder and gratitude thick in his voice. Nighthawk. The battle below became a slaughter. Rutherford's hired guns, already demoralized by the canyon fighting, broke and ran before warriors who moved like shadows and struck like lightning. Only the banker himself remained, crouched behind a boulder, his expensive suit torn and his pale face streaked with terror sweat. Come down, brother, Nighthawk called in Cherokee, his voice carrying easily up the stone walls. The hunt is over. As they descended, Cassandra saw the bodies scattered on canyon floor 5 men who died for Rutherford's twisted desires. The banker himself knelt in the dirt, hands raised in surrender, his earlier arrogance replaced by whimpering fear. Please, he babbled as Cormac approached. I can pay. Whatever you want. Gold, land, anything? What I want, Cormac replied, his voice soft as silk and twice as dangerous, is for you to go back to Millbrook. Tell everyone what happened here. Tell them what happens to men who hunt my wife. Nighthawk studied Cassandra with curious eyes. Taking in her scars, her wedding dress torn and dusty from climbing, the way she stood beside his brother with quiet courage. She is strong, this one, he said in English. The ancestors would approve. As dawn painted the canyon walls red and gold, Rutherford mounted his surviving horse with shaking hands. This isn't over, he snarled, some of his old malice returning. I'll bring the cavalry, the territorial government. You can't hide forever. Won't need to hide forever, Cormac replied. Just long enough. In the hidden Cherokee settlement 3 days north of Devil's Canyon, Cassandra learned what it meant to be truly accepted. The village nestled in a valley protected by ancient magic and older wisdom, where children played between earth lodges and women tended gardens that had fed the people for generations. She has warrior's marks, observed Diana, the clan mother, her weathered fingers tracing the scars on Cassandra's face with surprising gentleness. But did she earn them fighting or as victim? Sandra met the elder woman's penetrating gaze without flinching. Both, she answered honestly. I was victim first. But I choose to be warrior now. Around the council fire, painted faces nodded. Approval. These people understood scars bore them proudly as symbols of survival, strength, resistance against a world that had tried to destroy them. Here, among the dispossessed and defiant, a scarred white woman who'd chosen love over social. Standing found kinship. My brother chose well, Nighthawk declared, raising a cup of ceremonial wine. Welcome, sister with scars. May your children be strong and your enemies be few. But even as the celebration continued around them, Cormac pulled Cassandra aside, worry darkening his features. Rutherford won't give up. He'll be back with soldiers, maybe federal marshals. We can't stay here, won't risk bringing war to my people. She'd known this moment would come. The Cherokee had already sacrificed enough, been driven from ancestral lands, forced to hide in secret valleys while white civilization spread like wildfire across their hunting grounds. She wouldn't let her problems add to their suffering. Where? She asked simply. Canada, he replied. My cousin Swift Arrow crossed the medicine line 2 years ago. Says there's land there, peace, room for people like us to disappear. People like us. She smiled, testing the phrase. I like the sound of that. They spent their last evening in the village learning Cherokee marriage customs, receiving blessings and gifts from people who'd known Cormac since childhood. An ancient woman pressed a silver amulet into Cassandra's hands, a bear claw set with turquoise, symbol of strength and protection. For the children you will bear, she whispered in accented English, that they may walk in 2 worlds but belong wholly to themselves. That night, in the privacy of a guest lodge, husband and wife made love for the first time, tender and fierce, desperate and eternal, 2 scarred souls finding completion in each other's arms. Afterward, as Cassandra traced the bullet wound on Cormac's shoulder, she marveled at the journey that had brought them together. Regrets? He asked, reading her silence. Only one, she replied, that we didn't meet sooner. Dawn brought unwelcome visitors. Marshal Crawford rode into the village under a white flag, his weathered face grim with bad news. Behind him waited a full troop of cavalry, their blue uniforms stark against morning sky. Sorry, son, Crawford told Cormac as they met at the village edge. Rutherford went to the territorial capital. Filed charges, kidnapping, inciting Indian violence, theft of property. Judge issued warrants. Property? Cassandra's voice could have frozen hell. That's what he's calling you, ma'am. Says. The marriage ain't legal. Claims you were coerced. once you return to proper custody. Crawford spat tobacco juice, his disgust evident. Course, the judge is Rutherford's cousin. Funny how that works. The cavalry captain, a young man with soft hands and hard eyes, rode forward impatiently. Enough talk, Marshal. You there, breed surrender yourself and the woman. Make this easy for everyone. Nighthawk appeared beside his brother, war paint fresh on his cheeks, 50 armed warriors at his back. The message was clear. The Cherokee would not allow their kinsman to be taken without a fight. Easy? Cormac laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. Nothing's been easy since the day I fell in love with her. Why start now? The captain's hand moved toward his saber, but Crawford grabbed his wrist. Stand down, Lieutenant. These people have rights. Indians have no rights. The officer snapped. And neither do their white whores. The insult hung in mountain air like gun smoke. Around the village perimeter, Cherokee warriors checked their weapons and chose their positions. One word from Nighthawk, and the valley would run red with cavalry. Blood. But Cassandra stepped forward, her scarred face calm as winter sky. I'll go with you, she said quietly. No. Cormac's voice carried all the authority of a man who'd never backed down from a fight. Yes, she replied, her fingers finding his. Because running won't solve this. Because hiding won't change anything. Because somewhere there's another woman being told she's property. Another man being denied love because of his blood. She turned to face the cavalry captain. I'll return to face these charges, but not as property. As a free woman making her own choices. The young officer's smile was cruel as winter wind. You'll return as whatever the court decides you are. Then the court, said a new voice from the ridge above, will have to explain itself to me. Everyone looked up to see a familiar figure silhouetted against morning sun preacher Donovan, armed with righteousness and a Sharps rifle that could drop a buffalo at 500 yards. Papa? Cassandra's voice broke. Daughter, he replied, riding down to join the tense gathering. Heard there was some question about your marriage. Thought I might clarify matters for these gentlemen. He produced an official document from his coat-thick paper, official seals, signatures, and careful. Script. Territorial marriage license, properly filed and witnessed. Unless someone's questioning my authority to perform weddings? The cavalry captain sputtered protests, but Crawford examined the papers with professional attention. Looks legal to me, Lieutenant. Means the lady's married proper, regardless of what Rutherford claims. This isn't over, the officer warned, but his bluster had weakened. Behind him, his men shifted uncomfortably. Soldiers preferred clear enemies to tangled legal disputes. As the cavalry rode away. Defeated by paperwork and paternal love, Cassandra embraced her father with tears streaming down her scarred cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, Donovan replied grimly. Rutherford won't accept this. He'll find another way, another angle. You two still need to disappear, at least until tempers cool. But as they prepared for the journey north to Canada and freedom, Cassandra felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not just for herself and Cormac, but for all the outcasts and misfits who dared to love beyond society's narrow definitions. They would find their place in this world. Together. 6 months later, in a cabin overlooking the Saskatchewan River, Cassandra Brightfeather felt the first flutter of new life growing beneath her heart. Outside, spring snow melted into rushing water that carried winter away, leaving behind the promise of warmth and growing things. Another kick? Cormac asked, settling beside her on their handmade porch, his arms wrapping around her expanding waist. Strong one, she confirmed, her scarred hand covering his. I think this one's going to be a fighter. Below them, the small community they'd helped establish bustled with quiet activity. Cherokee, Creek, and Seminole families who'd crossed the medicine line seeking peace. White settlers fleeing various troubles. A few freed slaves looking for true freedom, all bound together by shared determination to build something better than what they'd left behind. "Letter from Papa," she said, holding up the envelope that had arrived with the weekly mail. "Rutherford died 3 weeks ago. Heart attack, they say. Found him in his office, clutching your wanted poster." Cormac was quiet for a long moment, processing the news that their greatest enemy was gone. "Feel anything?" he asked. "Relief," she admitted. "Shame about the relief, but mostly just ... freedom." The settlement had prospered beyond anyone's dreams. Rich soil, abundant game, neighbors who judged people by character rather than color or scarring. Cassandra had established a school where children learned to read in whatever language their parents spoke. Cormac led hunting parties and taught survival skills to newcomers still learning the harsh realities of frontier life. "Swift Arrow's wife wants to know if you'll help with her birth next month," he mentioned, running through mental lists of community business. Of course. She'd become unofficial midwife and healer, her own experiences with pain making her gentle with others suffering. The scars that had once made her an outcast now marked her as someone who understood what it meant to survive and heal. Hoofbeats on the main trail drew their attention. A single rider approached Young, dust-covered, pushing his horse hard. Cassandra tensed, old fears rising like winter ghosts. But the rider proved to be Johnny Blackthorn, a Creek boy who'd earned his place as the settlement's messenger and scout. His news, however, was troubling. "Territorial marshal coming," he reported, sliding from his exhausted mount. "Federal man from back east. Got questions about folks who crossed the line without proper papers." Cormac and Cassandra exchanged glances. They'd always known this day might come, the day when official attention turned northward, when bureaucrats decided to examine the legal status of American refugees living in Canadian territory. "How long?" Cormac asked. 2 days, maybe 3. Depends on weather." That evening, the settlement's council gathered in the community hall, a structure they'd raised together from local timber, decorated with symbols from all their various cultures. The question on everyone's mind was simple: stay and face official scrutiny, or scatter into the wilderness and start over elsewhere. "Running didn't save my people in Georgia," observed Samuel Crow Feather, the Cherokee elder. "Didn't save them. In Oklahoma Territory either. Maybe it's time to stop running." "Easy to say when you ain't got warrants hanging over your head," replied Moses Freeman, one of the freed slaves. "We all got something hanging over our heads," Cassandra said quietly, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "That's why we're here. That's what brought us together." She stood, her pregnancy evident but not slowing her down. "I say we stay. Meet these questions head on. Show them what we've built, what we've become. And if they try to drag us back..." "South?" asked Maria Santos, a Mexican woman fleeing an arranged marriage to a brutal rancher. Cormac rose to stand beside his wife. "Then they'll find out what happens when people with nothing left to lose decide to fight for everything they've gained." The vote was closer than expected, but the decision was unanimous in its finality. They would stay. Together. 2 days later, the federal marshal arrived with a small escort and impressive credentials. But instead of the harsh interrogation everyone feared, he conducted polite interviews, examined their settlement with obvious approval, and seemed more interested in their success than their past. "Remarkable," he told the council that final evening. "You've achieved something here that official policy has failed to accomplish: peaceful integration, productive cooperation, genuine community." He paused, studying faces around the fire. "Washington wants to know how you did it." "Simple," Cassandra replied, her hand finding Cormac's across the space between their chairs. We stopped seeing differences as obstacles and started seeing them as strengths. We learned that scars, whether on faces or hearts, don't diminish a person's worth. They prove it. The marshal nodded thoughtfully, making notes in his leather journal. The territorial government is prepared to offer official recognition to your settlement. Full legal status, protection under British colonial law, trade agreements with settlements to the south. He looked directly at Cassandra and Cormac. All past grievances forgotten, all warrants voided, fresh starts for everyone. As autumn painted the Saskatchewan Valley in shades of gold and crimson, Cassandra gave birth to their first child, a daughter with her mother's copper hair and her father's dark eyes. They named her Hope because that's what she represented, proof that love could triumph over hatred, that healing could follow even the deepest wounds. "She's perfect," Cormac whispered, cradling the tiny bundle while Cassandra recovered from the difficult birth. "Look closer," she said with tired humor. "See that small mark on her cheek? She's going to have her own scar to carry." The birthmark was barely visible, a small crescent moon that would fade with time, but Cormac understood what his wife meant. Their daughter would grow up in a world that still judged by appearances, still feared what it didn't understand. Then, "We'll teach her what scars really mean," he promised. "That they're not marks of shame but proof of survival. Not signs of weakness but evidence of strength." On their first wedding anniversary, the settlement held a celebration that drew visitors from as far as Montreal and St. Louis. Politicians, merchants, missionaries, and adventurers came to see the miracle community where outcasts had become. Leaders, where differences were celebrated rather than feared. But for Cassandra and Cormac, the greatest celebration was private standing together on their porch as sunset painted the sky in shades of promise. Their daughter sleeping peacefully in her cradle, their love having survived every test. "Any regrets?" he asked, the same question he'd posed a year ago in that Cherokee lodge. She touched the scars on her face, then placed his hand over her heart where newer, invisible scars had finally healed. "Only that it took so long to find you. And now?" "Now," she said, rising on tiptoe to kiss her warrior husband, "now I know that some things are worth fighting for. Some loves are worth any price. And some scars are worth bearing because they lead us exactly where we need to be." In the distance, wolves howled at the rising moon wild, free and unashamed of their savage song. Like the love between a Cherokee warrior and his scarred bride, their music was untamed, unbroken, and beautiful beyond civilized understanding. Had found their place in the world at last, not despite their differences, but because of them. Together they had built something that would endure long after the scars faded and the stories became legend. A love that conquered all, a community that welcomed all, and a hope that would inspire generations yet to come.